Sadly, I am coming to the end of my outdoor gardening season here in Zone 6, Ohio. So it might seem a little bit weird to be talking about watering the garden right now. But now is actually a great time of year to start thinking about watering, in that I can start planning for next spring. Now, one of the questions I get most frequently, especially when I do garden tours and folks see the size of the gardens that I'm dealing with, is how do you water all of that? So today I just wanted to share with you what I do, some of the mistakes I've made, what I plan on changing for the future, and some of my tricks for limiting the amount of watering I actually have to do out here. My first tactic is to use soaker hose or drip irrigation. And I use this method specifically for when I put out transplants and I'm not getting enough rain to really get them watered in well during their first couple days in the garden. I'll typically use this in my long, narrow planting rows, and I'll lay a soaker hose down the middle of the row and plant my transplants on either side. After I get them planted, I'll just let the soaker hose run for several hours, sometimes even up to overnight, depending on how dry the ground is. And if needed, I'll run it a couple more times in the following week, week and a half, just to make sure that those transplants are really getting watered in well. Now, you could do the very same thing with drip irrigation. I have very, very hard water here, so a lot of iron, a lot of sediment, things that will clog up irrigation really, really easily. So I tend to have a little bit better luck with the soaker hoses. That being said, these get clogged up eventually too. So either way, whether I'm using drip tape or soaker hose, they tend to only last me a season or two. The cost to replace these every couple of years is worth it to me because of the amount of time it saves me and how effectively this waters the root zone. The one thing I hope to change about my system using drip tape or soaker hose going forward is that right now, to run hoses out here in the garden, I have to basically take a giant long hose, drag it through my garden fence, drag it clear up to the house, and attach it to our faucet on the house. What would be ideal is to actually run an underground line from the house out to the garden with a spigot hookup out here, whether it be in the barn or a header near the garden, just so that I'm not having to drag hose back and forth all the time. So that's one of my future projects I hope to accomplish. My second method of watering is just a good old-fashioned sprinkler. And I found through years of trial and error that there are a couple specific types that work best for what I am doing out here. The first is an irrigation pole. This is a very, very old hand-me-down. I'm not even sure they make this exact model anymore, or this may have even been a handmade job, but it basically has a brass impact sprinkler head attached to the top of this very tall pole. This is at least 15 feet, if not 20. I've never actually measured. You just attach a hose down here to run it, and the sprinkler, because of its height, when turned on full blast, can reach almost my entire garden. So when it is really, really dry and everything desperately needs watered, I will turn this on, typically overnight, and just let it run all night to mimic a really good deep rain. Now, what's nice about this particular pole irrigation system is that if you have really good water pressure, you can actually hook multiple posts together and run them all at the same time to cover a huge expanse. I don't have that good of water pressure, so I can really only run one at a time, but it's something to consider if you have a lot of space to cover. My second sprinkler is a spike style sprinkler, and I like this a lot because I can water by specific zone. The few raised beds that I have typically need watered much more frequently than anything that I have in ground. So with the spike style sprinkler, I can just shove it in a raised bed, run it for a little while, and not worry about overwatering the stuff that doesn't need watered in the garden. It's also very lightweight and easy to move around, which is handy when I'm in a hurry. And the third sprinkler that I really like is the tripod style that I use at my parents'. Similar idea to the spike sprinkler in that I can water specific zones, such as one garden at a time. And because the tripod has adjustable settings, we can set this to pretty much cover just one garden bed at a time. Again, it's very, very lightweight, easy to move around and set up. so I can move it to whichever bed needs watered and not worry about watering a lot of extraneous area while I'm doing this. And a final word on sprinklers and overhead irrigation in general. If you live in an area where you're prone to fungal and bacterial foliar diseases and/or diseases that are spread via spore splash up from the dirt, overhead irrigation is definitely not the best route to go. A method like drip irrigation, where the water is not splashing up all over the plant foliage, is a much better choice. I do have a lot of these issues, but ultimately the convenience of using the sprinklers outweighs the downfalls of using the sprinklers, but I do try to limit the amount of overhead watering that I do overall. And yes, if you're wondering, even with the size of my gardens, I still water by hand. Now, I never water my in-ground beds by hand, but often if my raised beds or my containers just need a spot water, it's quicker to do it by hand than lugging a hose around or hooking up sprinklers, and it's a good job to give to the kids. So we have a couple tools for hand watering that I really, really like. First is this metal watering can that was a hand-me-down to me. I think it's been around for about 500 years. It's been run over by a truck, and it is still the best watering can that I have ever found. And I have gone through a lot of watering cans. I think it's a 3-gallon, which is just about perfect. It's balanced, and it has the perfect nozzle in that it releases the perfect amount of water even for young seedlings. I have searched and searched, and short of ordering something directly from England, I cannot find a comparable watering can. So if anyone in the States knows where I can find one of these, please share with me. A second hand watering tool I've been loving is this hose end sprayer from Greenmount. Now, they actually sent this one to me to try, and I told them up front that I was dubious as to whether this would ever replace my old favorite, which was a watering wand from A.M. Leonard. They said to go ahead and give it a try anyway, and I did, and I actually have been using this all the time. Now, this is one that you just attach to the end of a hose. What's nice is it has this, I think they call it like a fireman's lever that shuts the thing on and off. And it's also got multiple sprayer settings, anywhere from like a jet stream to a really light shower. So whatever you're watering or cleaning, it's basically got a setting for. My son in particular loves the jet setting because I think he's pretending to be a fireman. And I find myself using the shower or the soaker setting all of the time. And if you're interested in one of these for yourself, check out the link in the description to this video because there's a 10% off link for this Greenmount sprayer nozzle. And then we do have this rain barrel system set up on the back of the barn. Now, these style tanks are really nice, and often you can get them for free or cheap from local farmers. We've typically gotten them from farmer friends. Sometimes you can find them for sale on like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, but a lot of times farmers will get things like molasses for their cattle in these. You can just rinse them out and repurpose them as rainwater reservoirs. And setting them up in an elevated way like this helps to get enough water pressure that I can run a hose out to the garden and water that way. Now we have two right now with the plan to add more. And this one I don't have a hose attachment on. I use this to fill up my watering cans or buckets or the chicken water, things like that. The other one I do have a heavy duty hose attached to, and that one runs far enough that I can water all of the containers in the front of my garden. We used a rain barrel conversion kit that was offered through our county's Soil and Water Conservation Department. I think it was about $35 for the do-it-yourself converter kit, but a lot of other places have similar kits for sale. And if you don't need something this big, the same thing can be done with something like these 55-gallon tubs. And one of my many hope to do someday projects is to figure out some kind of a pump system for these that I could actually get enough water pressure to run a sprinkler using these water reservoirs. We'll see if I can get to that. And if anybody's done a system setup like that, I'd love to hear from you. And I did promise to share with you a few tricks that I use to limit the amount of watering I'm having to do here in the garden. The first is not so much a trick as it is a benefit of having a specific soil type. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you may know that I have clay soil and I tend to whine about it a lot. But the one blessing of clay soil is that it does hold on to water. Now, sometimes that can be a bad thing, but in the middle of July and August when there's no rain, it is actually a blessing. The true trick that I use to limit the amount of watering is that I rely heavily on mulches. Now, whether that's a mulch like straw, hay, grass clippings, leaf mulch, or a green living mulch in the way of cover crops, they all serve the same purpose, which is to keep the soil from drying out quickly. And I mulch everything, walkways, up around the plants in my beds, pretty much anywhere there is exposed soil, it is getting a mulch. And that drastically cuts down on how quickly my soil dries out and therefore how often I have to water. So to give you an idea, in my in-ground beds back here, I am typically only watering when I transplant seedlings and then maybe 1 to 3 times through the months of July and August when it gets really hot and dry here. Now with the raised beds and containers, I do have to water those much more frequently, maybe once a week during the summer because they dry out so much more quickly. So that pretty much sums up what I am doing to keep my gardens watered. I'd love to hear from you. What are you doing to keep your plants' thirst quenched? And if you found today's video helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.